This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results.
It's no different than being a professional baseball player. You can't be a one-trick pony. You have to be a 5-tool player in order to succeed in this game.
This is the Power Producers Podcast, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, it's David and Kyle with the Power Producers Podcast, where we were refining and redefining the sales game. Today we have with us Mr. Derek Hayden from Shelbyville, Illinois. What's going on, Derek?
Not much, guys. How are you guys doing?
Good.
It's Friday, which means it's one more day till Saturday, which is the 6th day of the week. I end up working most weeks, so I got that going for me. Well, Derek, listen, man, I found you on LinkedIn because you were religious about posting content, and I started watching it every now and again and sharing some of it. I think it's valuable and people can learn a lot from the stuff that you're posting. So I wanted to have you on the show to talk to you a little bit, find out, all the stuff you guys are doing up there. Why don't you take a couple seconds and let everybody know kind of who you are, where you came from, how you got into insurance and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn. And I'm glad I at least have a few viewers of our content there. So, yeah, I'm a producer, risk advisor for an agency called Shelbyville Insurance here in Shelbyville, Illinois. We're also associated with our sister company, Danzig Insurance Risk Advisors. So I was born and raised here in Shelbyville, and it's a small town. Just to give you and the listeners a gauge of how small it is, we're just under 5,000 people in our town here, in a county of about 22,000 people. So I often get when people hear where I'm from, some people are familiar with our little town, usually one of two reasons. So if anybody listens to or watches The Simpsons, I don't know if you guys are fans of The Simpsons or not, but The Simpsons live in Springfield, which Springfield is the capital of Illinois, of course. Right. And the rival of Springfield in The Simpsons is Shelbyville. Oh. So it's hilarious because they depict Shelbyville as being like a bunch of rednecks and degenerates, and it's hilarious because it kind of hits home with our little town here. So a lot of people hear about
it's hilarious because it's true.
The Simpsons. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, dude, I had like 5,000 kids in my senior class.
I mean that's pretty tiny, man. So I mean, tell us a little bit about how you got into insurance. I mean, did you grow up?
Sure.
That was your aspirations?
Absolutely. Well, I had no idea where I was going to land. So, like I said, born and raised here. Other than my college years, I lived here. So, came back after college and kind of landed into substitute teaching. So, it was funny because are you guys familiar with Eastbound and Down? Kenny Powers?
Oh yeah,
my life story.
So I was living the Kenny Powers life. Like I played college baseball. Had no idea what I was going to do when I got out of college, and landed in substitute teaching. Well,
how did you hold on.
There's so many good.
Like I'm trying to figure out how you didn't end up in the Mexican League.
Oh man, if someone would have called me to go, I'd have been there in a heartbeat.
You and me both, brother.
Yep. So they anyway, substitute teaching for year and a half, and I quickly found that being in charge of a classroom full of teenagers was not my cup of tea. So I was trying to find a way to do something different, and I heard of an opening at a local agency I happened to know one of the agency owners. I had gone to high school with a couple of his kids, and I was like, I'll check it out. And I remember sitting in the interview, and one of the owners asked me, he's like, Derek, what's something that you want to try not to do? I was like, it'd be great if I didn't have to do any door-to-door sales. So here I am knocking on every door in the Midwest trying to drum up business. So it was just funny how I kind of fell into it. But that's how I got where I am now. I've been with the agency now for almost 8 years. And, I guess.
So what was his response when you said, I don't want to do any door-to-door? Did he just laugh and be like,
yep, pretty much.
All right, that's cool. Well,
he's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to offer you. Yeah. He just kind of let it go. And he's like, well, I think this guy can handle it. And, didn't really say a whole lot. So, but yeah, it's fun. You start and like the first week on the job, you learn like 2 things about insurance. They're like, all right, here's some business cards, go knock on some doors. I'm like, but I said that's, what I was trying to anyway. So turns out I kind of enjoy it. I enjoy it. So, but no, being in a small town creates a lot of hurdles for me, which kind of is one of the reasons why I approach marketing and social media the way I do. So good thing about being in a small town is I know a lot of people. Bad thing about being in a small town is I know a lot of people. So there's a good chance if I know them, one of my competitors knows them as well. So that was a huge hurdle for me getting into the business was relationships. If one of my prospects goes to church with their current agent, they're not likely to fire that guy. And I've learned to qualify prospects a little better than I used to, but it was a struggle when you first start, especially in a small town. It's a smaller pond to fish from. So anyway, that's why I kind of fell into approaching marketing the way I do now.
So talk a little bit about what you do, man. I mean, I know that a lot of the stuff that I've seen in terms of content has to do with partially self-insured or self-insured benefits plans.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that translates to Shelbyville, right? I mean,
it doesn't.
There's no way you're writing that much of that kind of health product in your town.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So I initially started, my focus was not benefits. I landed a pretty good size account at the end of my first year. And I got the meeting initially for a commercial opportunity. And some of the questions they were asking, I was just completely confused because it was not about commercial insurance. It was about benefits. And it was just a much easier conversation. And you're
what are
exactly right.
Hey, so, what are some examples of those questions if you can remember them?
Yeah. Basically, it just has to do with about the time I started, Affordable Care Act had really started to hit home with people. And it was Affordable Care Act questions. And I didn't know a ton of the answers being new to the business. But I had people in my corner that did. So I was like, those are really good questions. I want to make sure that, I'm answering them correctly. And I just brought someone in and literally I landed a BOR just because we answered questions about the Affordable Care Act that no other broker or agent was able to answer. So in my mind, when I started to kind of focus a little bit on the benefits, it's like that was a lot easier than getting in the door and trying to quote these commercial accounts. So I started to dabble in the benefits side and try to learn a little more, about the Affordable Care Act. It's a different animal from the commercial side, which I've been focusing most of my time on. So what I did is I would just, I would do what I do now. I would call people and ask people questions. You guys talk about Xywave all the time. Broker Briefcase. I mean, you can learn anything you want off a Broker Briefcase. So I would watch their training videos. I'd download their documents. I'd read about the Affordable Care Act. I'd read about employee benefits and try to learn what struggles employers were going through with everything that goes into the benefits side.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially when you're dealing with like the partially self-insured stuff. I guess even the self-insured, for the most part, I'm going back way earlier in my career at this point, probably like 12 to 15 years ago. But for me, it was always a very natural conversation understanding workers' comp and how that policy is structured and all of the pieces and parts that go into it, especially if you understand like retrospectively rated programs and stuff like that, you could naturally explain a partially self-insured benefits plan because the structure at its surface is almost identical. And so it's interesting. A lot of the accounts that I would write, I would lead with the PNC because it was much easier for me to have the conversation around, at that time it was really property insurance more than anything else. But as we started digging in to the workers' comp, you can bet your last dollar that if I'm talking to you about workers' comp, there's a 100% chance I'm going to ask you about your benefits too, because I think there's a direct correlation between the two of them, right? And so it's interesting. So with that being said, are you doing any PNC at all now? Have you been able to parlay you leading with benefits into pulling in PNC opportunities? So you're kind of doing both, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. So a lot of what I do as far as door openers for our ideal client size, just so you guys know, is basically any group that has 50 to 300 employee lives on their plan. So like you said, it's a natural transition from benefits to the work comp, especially. It really, work comp is an employee benefit. There's nothing that the employer receives other than the coverage that's mandated by the state. So it's a natural transition for us from benefits to work comp. So that is one thing that we are really working on now, especially myself and one of my business partners in crime. His name's Garrett Ulmer in our office. We are really trying to dig into the work comp so we can make it more of an easier transition conversation wise, because I think there's a huge opportunity in connecting the dots there.
What does that conversation look like now for you? Because I mean, like we're doing it essentially the other way, where we're typically talking about comp first, and then if there's issues there, we transition into the benefits. Because if from our perspective, obviously, if there's a bunch of claims on the workers' comp, we want to see what's going on the employee benefits. Maybe they don't have a very robust plan, and that's why people are filing claims. Some of them might be bogus. So like, what's the transition look like for you guys when you're kind of doing it the other way?
Sure. So initially, when we're getting in the door with benefits, we lead with basically pointing out that benefits is typically the second or third largest expense on a business's P&L statement. I mean, and there's typically no argument to that. When you look at how sizable that
outside of payroll,
right.
That is probably the biggest expense in most employers.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the way that we kind of hit home with work comp and the benefits is we'll ask, say, do you have a safety program to control your workers' comp costs? Oh yeah. Well, do you have a return to work program to control, getting people back to work on a timely fashion? Oh yeah, we have that. And then we say, what are you doing to control your benefits costs? And they kind of look at us with big eyes and they're like, we raised deductibles last year. And so that's how we get the natural transition. Is what I've done with a few of our groups is actually we've created a safety and wellness program within that group. So you're not only helping the group with benefits and wellness, you're translating it to safety on the job as well. So it becomes a talk about not just benefits, but work comp at the same time.
I'll tell you what, man, and there's going to be some things that it'll be very interesting to see if the technology catches up and they're able to make it where it works with both, right? Where it's compatible with both benefits and workers' comp. But what I'm referring to specifically is wearables, right? So you have a lot of large self-insured programs. Like the one I was using as an example is Hillsborough County, Florida, where I live in Tampa area, has a self-insured program for all the teachers and everything. Well, they have the ability to get discounts and all kinds of stuff for wearing wearables, and then they earn points, which subsequently they can turn in for things that from like shopping from a catalog or whatever else. It's also happening in workers' comp, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to maybe combine those two, because if you've got somebody that has a wearable that they're wearing for benefits already, or vice versa, if they can figure out a way to make that technology cross the gap to the other one, I think it's going to be an interesting game changer with all the data that people are able to collect. I'm trying to figure out, truthfully, how they can get around some of the HIPAA and other stuff on the work comp side,
right.
From an HR perspective, requiring an employee to wear a wearable.
I feel like that's the biggest hurdle, honestly.
Well, we've got a guy, I don't know, Kyle, if you saw it or not, but in Killing Commercial, who posted an article about wearables in workers' comp, and it's a friend of his that works or owns this company. And that guy, we're going to have that guy come on, either to do a killer call with us or to come on the podcast. But that's my main question. I think the idea is great. We have the technology. We use data for everything else. So why wouldn't we? I do think, to your point, Derek, I think a lot of times employers feel handcuffed, because that's what they've been trained, right? Look, if you can be creative, I don't care if it's PNC or if it's benefits, if you can be creative in your approach and you can ask questions that nobody else is asking relevant to what the topic is, just like you said, what are you doing to control benefits costs? That's no different than me going into a manufacturer. I can tell you that if I walk into a manufacturing company, there are 3 questions I'm going to ask every single time. How do you measure quality? And they can tell me. How do you measure productivity? And how do you measure safety? They can answer the first 2, but most of the time, they have no way to tell me how they measure safety, which isn't a shock because I'm constantly calling on people who have experience mods of one or higher. But it just blows my mind that before I got to them, nobody else had ever even asked that question. And how do you expect to get good results when you don't even have a benchmark to work from? And the same thing holds true. It's crazy that employers think that the only way they can control costs is by passing that cost on to the employee. Now, we don't do benefits. We have a joint venture in place with a guy who does nothing but benefits and retirement planning. So we refer 100% of that over, and he refers 100% of the P&C to us. So I don't get into these discussions any more than I have to, because my goal is just to get Rod in there and let him do his thing. But it's crazy, man, to think that, that's because all you're doing, you're in a death spiral at that point, right? I had a group one time that wanted to come on and they didn't want to give a contribution. I said, well, you're not giving benefits, you're giving Cobra. Right. The average employee doesn't understand what the real benefits cost is. I'm a huge proponent when you go in and engage with an employer to immediately do total compensation statements. Immediately. Mm-hmm. If you can't get it through your payroll company, we have the ability to go in through the client portal in Zywave and do them ourselves. But that early
that's huge, man.
Yeah.
Like that is, be able to put that in front of somebody and give them the perspective. I mean, so I first saw those at CoAB. We had that as something that they could just pull, and in order to help in the recruiting and retaining of talent. And it was just like, I mean, because you guys, especially in the industry that you're talking about, like your light manufacturing, whatever, who are gonna jump ship for an extra quarter an hour or whatever it is, 50 cents an hour, but they don't realize that they're getting these really robust benefits and all these other forms of compensation. I mean, that's a huge tool that I need to use more here because I haven't, but that's huge.
It's huge on the benefits side specifically because you can take a guy that's making $15 an hour and illustrate that his cost to the employer is like $30 plus an hour by the time you factor in all of those things. But to that point, I mean, we're at a point right now where if you're a trade contractor or light manufacturing or things like that, you're having a hard time getting people. So you don't want to lose the people that you have, and you want to be able to get new people in the door on a budget. And I mean, that's just a really easy way to show them. Now, using your example, if that guy goes for $2 an hour, That's $80 a week, $320 a month, basically $4,000 a year for all practical purposes. We'll call him that. But if he has $1,000 deductible on his medical and he goes to a place that has a $5,000 deductible, and God forbid he has something happen, he just ate up his entire raise and then some in the deductible layer.
Right. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I see an issue that's going to be prevalent here soon because of all the COVID issues that these employers are facing as well. They're going to be turning, to some type of cost containment. They're going to have to. And I can see a huge battle starting with raising deductibles and employees possibly even jumping ship, understanding that their out of pocket may be, going up, and they're going to be looking for the employer that's got the most competitive benefit package.
What's the biggest pushback that you get or biggest objection? I remember, so I used to work for a PEO before I joined Florida Risk, and a lot of the time it was a benefits play. And I remember getting, some of the objections. I'm just curious if it's similar to what I used to hear.
Sure. As far as when we're trying to get in the door with a group, the biggest concern is they are terrified of the word self-funded or partially self-funded. I don't know if they've heard bad stories from, other employers, or if they've been self-funded in the past and got burned. But they are just absolutely terrified, I guess, at the nomenclature of saying, self-funded or partially self-funded benefits. So one thing we've got to get over as far as a hurdle is educating them on, there are so many protections in place now for these small to middle market groups to go self-funded. It's more of a gamble to be fully insured than it is self-insured in today's world. And COVID has just magnified a lot of those issues. You look at these groups that say they're paying $100,000 a month in benefits premium, and for 3, 4, 5 months, procedures were completely shut down. So they're still paying $100,000 in employee benefits premium when their employees aren't going to the doctor or having any procedures. It's just gonna, it's going to be a huge opportunity. For us, I hate to say that, at the employer's expense, but it's a huge opportunity.
Well, I have, one of the things that I've seen in the marketplace down here, and again, I'm going to tell you, I don't really talk about this stuff a lot, but I read, enough to make me dangerous. But everything seemed to be pushing towards those level funded plans with, for a while there. And I think that was a great idea until it wasn't. It seems like a lot of them have blown up, and the carriers down here aren't even really aggressively going after them anymore. Are you seeing the same thing up there, or are you pretty much trying to steer people that have a clean census into that partially self-insured arena?
Yep. We don't typically start with the level funded side. We typically go straight towards our initial play for these middle market groups, 50 plus employees, is partially self-funded through a captive. There's so many protections through a captive. We're lucky we have access to a few of them, and one in particular that's just, it makes all the sense in the world to move to it with the climate of the fully insured world. It's just a matter of getting over the initial fear of hearing the word self-insured or partially self-insured.
Yeah, I agree. And Kyle's going to now mark this down on his calendar. Is the second time he's heard somebody use the word nomenclature. Usually I'm the only one, and catch heat for it. But yeah, I think there's just, and again, man, here we are, we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with the election. All, PNC doesn't get affected by that stuff. On benefits, all bets are off, Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to think of what's going to happen. From a work comp perspective, Illinois is not the easiest state to deal with either.
It's tough. Yeah.
It's generally considered a pretty tough comp state.
So what's the reasoning behind that? Why is the market like that?
I'm gonna let the resident Illinois guy
really
tell
don't
you.
know.
Yeah, I was asking him, not you, dude.
I can tell you.
I really don't know. I don't know if it's certain laws. I know in most cases the laws are more favorable towards employees, a little more generous payouts maybe. But I don't know the exact reason. I'm sure that has a small portion to do with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, anytime the carriers are having to pay higher than average claim values out and things like that, it's usually because the legislation in the state is more favorable to the employee. And I mean, listen, you go in and deal with somebody who's a business owner or a VP of ops or whatever, even in a state that's not skewed that way, and they're still going to tell you how bad they get screwed over. So, some of that has to do with perception too.
Yeah, one thing as far as the mod goes, and I'm not super familiar with other states, but in Illinois, for the medical only discount, they've got to be back to work within the 3 working days, I believe. And I think some other states.
Wow.
I believe it's
that is a very short window.
Yeah. And so I know some states are 5, some are even more than that. So that's probably a large reason for the difficulty employers see with work comp.
Yeah, that would be because, I mean, do you know what is the split point in Illinois, 17 or 17.5?
17 or 17.5. Yeah, it's 17.5. I'd have to look at it, but yeah, it's right there.
I don't remember. I half the time I don't remember Florida's, man. So I can't be held responsible for remembering other sites. But I mean, that's a big deal, especially as you're consulting with people on the workers' comp side, because we lead with, I mean, to me, low hanging fruit is return to work. If you've only got 3 days to get somebody back, you need to be having the right conversations because, and listen, part of when we talk about this stuff, I think it's important to put the disclaimer on there that I'm talking about Florida, right? I'm talking about my experience. You're talking about Illinois because that's your experience. If you hear me say something about how you should handle an indemnity claim or things that we do, probably a good idea to go ahead and check and make sure you can do that in your state, right? Because there are places that you are not able to, like Illinois actually is one of them. I don't believe that you're able to file aggravated inequities for up to 3 years.
I'd have to check into that, but I've heard the same thing from a few other people. So,
yeah, I mean, it's crazy because that's another thing that I hang my hat on down here. It's an easy way to create doubt.
One of our wedges.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was talking to Jason Cass, and him and his business partner had a really nice size account on the line. And I was like, Cass, you need to go in and do this and this and this. And so they go to do it. And like, we're told we can't do it. I'm like, you can't do that in Illinois? That's crazy. Tell me why. It's an NCCI state. But I mean, you have to remember everything is legislated at the state level with comp, and there's going to be differences here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Kyle, I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
As far as the marketing scheme goes, sorry, I'm jumping back into the marketing side.
Mm-hmm.
So are you at this point a producer of Florida Risk?
Yes.
Okay, so not an owner, just at this point in time, a producer.
Right.
So you and I are in a similar boat then.
Mm-hmm.
When you're producing content to communicate the stuff we're talking about right now, do you produce your own content or are you basically trying to promote more of Florida Risk's content?
Yeah, well, so our marketing, we have a lot of automated stuff. And David's talked about it a number of times. We've got like our solicitation calendar that goes out, a different thing for each month. So it really depends on what we're talking about. But if I'm going to target somebody specifically, most of the time that's going to be something that I create on my own. If it's more generic and going out to a bunch of people, it's going to be some of our automated stuff that's built into our CRM and everything.
And a lot of Zywave stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Zywave. Yeah. I use Zywave. That's like pretty much my first stop. After I do my research on businesses that I'm going after, I'm going into Zywave to either create some sort of leave behind that's specific to their business that I can personalize with our logo on there and their company logo. That is a huge resource for us, as we've talked about a million times. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Derek, your question's a good one. It's one that is not always well received by agency owners, okay, sure, that are not as open-minded as what I am. I don't care how Kyle brands himself. I just want him to go out and write business. He'll have ownership in Florida Risk. That's already mapped out, to a certain degree. He has a path to be a partner and all of that stuff. So there's really no concern on my end. One of the issues that I have with a lot of the, if you will, old guard agencies out there is that agency owners can't get their head around the fact that just because somebody develops a personal brand doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to use that against you and go out and start their own agency, right? I mean, it would make absolutely no sense at all for Kyle to ever leave to try and start his own agency, because I'll give him every reason not to do it, by taking care of him here. And if you do that, then you have the ability to perpetuate the agency. And truthfully, man, the guy's, 16, 17 years younger than what I am. So he's the one that's going to have to take over when it's time for me to get out. If we don't sell and both cash out and quit working for the rest of our life. But there's a huge debate, man. There's a huge debate out there right now where agency owners just don't believe in producers branding themselves. They want everything branded as the agency, because they're concerned that producer will build that brand on their nickel and then turn around and leave them. Unequivocally, the people that are doing that are the same ones that don't have a path to equity. They gripe about people having book ownership, and quite frankly, usually are the smaller agencies, because they're never going to grow because they don't think outside, the norm of what they do. I'm a big believer on branding your process, right? I don't even care if the agency name's on there. For Florida Risk, it's okay because it plays down here. But, I've got a good friend of mine, Greg Hogan, who owns an agency up in New York, and it was typically a Main Street agency. The name of his agency is the Caraba Agency, but he's moving into middle market. And, I had a conversation with him. He was down here in February, and I said, Greg, listen, man, I'm not being disrespectful. Please don't think that I am. I said, but I have a concern that if you're going to work the processes and the things that I'm teaching you to go upstream into the middle market from where you're at right now, which you're perfectly capable of doing, I think your agency name is going to hold you back. I don't think you're going to be able to go in and compete with Brown and Brown or USI or whoever you would be going in to compete against on these accounts. And I want you to be thinking about what you would do to brand your process as opposed to, for the middle market stuff, as opposed to branding your agency. He's like, listen, man, you don't have to tell me. I've already been thinking about it. I've already started working on the stuff. So basically, anything he does in the middle market is going to be Catalyst Risk Solutions powered by the Caraba Agency. So everything he does is going to be Catalyst Risk Solutions. You can go into a middle market account and as crazy as that sounds, I know that it'll work, right? You're better served going in with a brand that sounds like, yeah, all my competition's probably using something like this. Or in my case, I opened my agency and I had to come up with the name of something that sounded like it had been around for a while. And in 20 minutes, I came up with Florida Risk Partners. In literally, like the next week, I go out and I'm calling on people like, oh, yeah, I've heard of you guys. You've been around for a while, haven't you? And I'm like, nailed it.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think of how branding, affects things like that. And it just even getting somebody's ear to listen, to what you have to say. You could be you have the greatest mousetrap in the world, but if you don't have the right package around it, nobody's going to pick it up off the shelf and take it home.
Right. I will say I'm very lucky. My agency principals are similar minded to you, David. They've supported us in building content and marketing ourselves to go out and get those customers. Now they're not going to throw a ton of money at just me for my marketing bill. That's a hurdle I have, but they've given me a leash to say, take it and run, dude. Whatever you got to do to write business, get your name out there, go ahead and have it. We have a kind of a vast demographic of owners, different ages, and even we've got buy-in from all of them, from the oldest to the youngest. They're all on board with me and any other age or producers that want to go after it. We can do whatever we want. So I'm pretty lucky in that aspect.
Well, I think it goes back to what you're saying, David, about the overall, mindset of the agency owner and providing a path to equity for their people, or the ones, who are the opposite. Like you said, those agencies that are set up the other way, that's where you're going to find the people who are trying to go out and create their own brand for their own endeavors in the future.
Listen, I could ask 3 questions. I am thoroughly convinced of this. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I could ask 3 questions and pretty much pinpoint the average, the size of your agency. Number 1, do you have a path to equity for your producers? Will they have ownership in the enterprise as a whole, not just their book? Number 2, do you have a CRM? And number 3, do you use a tool? You don't have to use Zywave, but do you have some sort of a tool, either Zywave itself or something similar, that you've invested in to help make your people stronger in the marketplace? If they say no to those 3 things, those agencies are not at $1 million in revenue. I would be absolutely shocked if they were. And if they say yes to those 3 things, they're in the other column. They're all usually 2-3 million or more in revenue, because that's why. I mean, that's what blows my mind, man. This stuff is so simple. And people are just too cheap. They don't get it. Like, they want a return on their investment without making the investment. Last time I checked, Apple's not sending me dividend checks because I don't own stock in Apple. Like, what are you doing? Invest in your freaking agency.
I probably should with how much Apple stuff I have. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, one problem that I see with agencies, and you guys might be able to throw your 2 cents in here as well, but I'm going to give kudos to our agency owners. We have access to numerous tools to help us write business. I don't think in Central Illinois that there's another agency that has as many tools as we do. Now, one thing that I feel like every agency falls short in is you kind of get excited to get the new shiny object, and then you forget to use it as time goes. One thing that I'm lucky, I'm younger, I'm a little more tech savvy than some other producers. I can pick up a tool, play around with it, and I can use it, pretty quickly and be successful with it. A lot of agencies, and I talk to agents all the time, they get these tools, but they don't know how to use them. I always use a phrase: you can give a ditch digger a backhoe, but if he doesn't know how to turn it on, he's going to pick up the shovel again. So that's one thing. Maximizing.
Hey, hold on a second. Tool. That sounds like it came from a guy that lives in a city of 5,000 people. By the way, you just validated the Simpsons
Shelbyville original right there. No, I completely agree with you, man. I feel like we've talked about that on probably like the last 4 podcasts that we've done, the shiny object syndrome, where people are always wanting to go out and get the newest toy, even though it may not. Like you said, they may not know how to use it or utilize all of it, or B, it just might not be the right fit for their agency based on what they're going after. They're seeing, all these other people on this, forum on social media are using this, so this, must be the thing that's going to take me to the next level. But yeah, I mean, you might not be in the same space as they are. So I agree 100% with what you're saying.
I can tell you one of the things that I've done that's been, that has been a mistake that I've learned from is sometimes you think that you can add infrastructure and scale at the same time, right? And that's gonna make it work really, really well for you. So you go out and you have the Mac Daddy subscription to Zywave. You have, we have HubSpot as our CRM. We do. There's no rules for marketing with us. Like, we'll do whatever we need to do. But I mean, I look at the investments and things that I've made, the VoIP system, the raters that we use, and all of these other things. And then you're throwing people in left and right at the same time. I'm not going to bring anybody on board until we've mastered what we've got, because I don't even have the right people to train the next people on how to use that. And I mean, even using virtual assistants, right, which is something we're moving toward for some of these tasks, it takes a long time to prepare just to bring a VA on board, because they may know how to do something, but they don't know how your agency does it. So now you have to stop, define your process, record that process so that it can be replicated and other people can do it. A lot of people don't realize this, but the whole reason that my Killing Commercial sales training exists is for me. I just figured out a way to monetize it. It's in existence for Florida Risk Partners, so that the next producer I bring in, I can say, boom, go through this curriculum. And there it is. And they'll know our process. They'll have their pipeline built. They'll understand our marketing. They'll get every ounce of that without me having to spend time going through it. And that's really not even my biggest concern. My biggest concern is just the lack of consistency if it's not something formalized, because then you have somebody that's the point of sale that I think knows something and they don't know that. And I'm like, crap, I screwed up, man. I failed you as the leader of the organization because I didn't give you what you needed to be successful. So that's why I created it. But to Kyle's point, there are so many tools that are out there, and I think we all pull them in real time, and then we don't have the training to back it up and make sure that the ditch digger doesn't go back to the shovel.
That, or you're trying to do too many things at once, or implement too many different technologies.
Well, look, I don't think that I have to go on record and admit that I'm certainly capable of that. Like, my mind works at a speed and in a way that is so different than a lot of other people. And I'm not saying that in a positive sense or to brag or anything. It's just, it is what it is. And so if I get an idea, I'm gone, dude. I'm gone in 0 to 100, and I'm going to go until I run into a wall or until I get done what I need to get done. But in the meantime, if another good idea comes up, I'm not going to wait until I'm done with this one. I'm going to start doing both of them at the same time. And there's times where I'm working 18, 20 hours a day because I'm juggling 15 different projects that all seemed like really good ideas that weren't. I've had to really force myself to step back and say, okay, let's look at doing this. Let's look at doing this. So, perfect example, us putting personal lines in our agency. I fell victim to that because other people said, you should have personal lines. What do they know about my business or my business model? They just made me feel like I was missing out because all of these other agencies had personal lines and everything else. I never needed to add it, even though I had the ability in the systems or anything. So now I'm in a position where before I do anything else or add anything or anybody to the agency, I got to get personal lines locked down. We've been working on it for 4 to 6 weeks now. We have a dedicated resource there, and then we'll start putting some marketing around it. Then we'll figure out whether or not we need to staff it out. But I mean, when you've got personal lines leads coming in that you're not even trying to get, but the people on your team aren't 100% trained on how to use the rater, that's a problem, right?
Yeah. It completely defeats the purpose of us trying to bring on personal lines, because it's supposed to be something that's quick, doesn't take up a lot of our time, and it ends up doing the opposite for little to no revenue.
Yeah, and that's my fault, right? I take full responsibility for that. I should have done a lot more as we put it in. So good news is I also learned from my mistakes, so I don't ever replicate them. But, 2019 was a really wild year for us for a whole variety of reasons.
A whole variety of reasons, yes.
Yeah. So talk about your marketing strategy a little bit. I mean, I know you're doing the video stuff on LinkedIn, but I'm kind of interested to hear other things. Like, I don't stalk you everywhere you go, but I will say your beer game looks pretty solid. I saw that video over the weekend, and I'm going to let you talk about that for a little bit too. But I want to hear your marketing stuff and kind of what you're doing and what you're seeing works, and sort of how you're tracking it and all of that.
Yeah,
nice. I'm interested.
Beer. Yep. I'll get into that here shortly.
When you're from a town of 5,000,
I'm sure you do a lot of things.
That's right.
After you've grabbed the shovel back and dug the ditch, you're thirsty at the end of the day, and there's nothing better than good home
we
brew.
brew a lot of other things too, but for legal sake, I'm going to stick with beer. Yeah, I'm going to kind of step back into early on in my career when I kind of started noticing why I needed to get into more of a social media presence. So I mentioned breaking relationships, and the strong relationships in the small community are tough to break, and it's tough to gain attention, when you're in that type of environment. So it was like 6 months in after I started, I went to a new producer school at one of our carrier partners' home offices. And the first couple of days was insurance training, and I was like blacked out by day 2. I could not absorb any more insurance acronyms. I was like checking out, and I was wondering if this was even the right decision for me to be involved in insurance or not. Then I remember there was a sales coach that came in the second, half of the week, and they hit home with exactly what I was going through. It was, trying to gain attention in your marketplace. So I went back to the agency and I tried to employ a couple of those things that I'd learned. And I asked our agency at that time, I was like, can I take over our social media platforms? And they're like, sure, go ahead. We don't care. The only thing that they were posting was like, happy Thanksgiving, get a quote from us, call us now. So I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And in the first post I did, what I did is I created a weekly post and I called it Derek's Tuesday Tips. I would just post a picture of me doing something silly and putting a couple tips, underneath in the heading. And the first one was a true story from our office. We had someone who clogged the toilet, and as low man on a totem pole, they're like, Derek, come on. They handed me a plunger. I'm like plunging away. I was like, guys, take a picture of this. I'm posting on Facebook. And I can't say I wrote any business from that post, but what it did is it started to gain attention.
But you didn't not write any business.
Exactly. You're exactly right. So that started to gain attention because people think it's funny and you start to get likes, and it's like, okay, people are starting to notice me. I can remember about 4 to 6 weeks after that, I posted one where it really was like, okay, I'm onto something. We had an owner who had an antique Chevy truck. It's like, man, you got to drive that to the office someday. I'm going to take some pictures in front of it, post it on Facebook. So I did, and I did like a tip about antique vehicles and, said that we insure these vehicles. And we got like 4 Facebook messages that week just from that post. And I wrote all 4 personal lines accounts.
There you go.
I was like, all right, here we go. So that just kind of is where I started and how I started to gain some attention in my little marketplace. One tip or one saying, I guess, that I try to live by when it comes to social media marketing. Are you guys big Gary Vee fans at all?
I'm familiar with him. I wouldn't say that I'm a big fan, but I've seen a number of his, posts and videos and all that.
Yeah, I don't dislike him. I don't
Right.
necessarily follow him though.
Same.
I watch his stuff.
He's the worst.
I watch a few of his things. It starts to get a little redundant here and there.
Yeah,
but,
right.
One of his sayings, what really hit home with me, it was to become the social media mayor of your marketplace. I'm like, that's a perfect saying for my geographical area. Everybody knows who the mayor is.
Sure.
They look at him as the trusted advisor for the community. So that's what I try to do when it comes to marketing, is be the trusted advisor, be the educator of my market. So what we did, myself and the guy I mentioned before, Garrett, in our office, we do a lot of stuff together as far as videos go. We just went in and we wanted to define what niches we wanted to target. And of course, what you guys mentioned before is the benefits and self-funded stuff for middle market groups. So we used it as an educational opportunity for us and for our prospects. So what we did, we tried to think of issues that we ran into when we're out talking to prospects. You guys talk about it all the time. What were some questions that popped up that you can do a video on? And so what we're doing is we're trying to eliminate some of the fears around self-funded and sharing that not only on LinkedIn, but we have an email campaign that goes out every other week with the videos that we're doing. So that's one of the niches that you guys see. Another niche we developed was more of a geographical niche, which is just basically targeting our backyard for personal lines, small commercial, and farm. So what we're doing is we're basically in our town plus about a 30-mile radius, we're targeting these communities. And what we're doing is we're typically not talking about insurance at all. We've developed a regular show that we call the D&G show. And it's kind of become a little bit of a celebrity opportunity for people who are invited to be on our show. You're like, oh, I get to be on the D&G show. And so we're literally interviewing the mayor. We're interviewing police officers. We're interviewing business owners that are, have a high visibility in town. and we're not asking a single word about insurance. We're just trying to get our face out there so people know who we are. And then we're coupling that with other forms of marketing. We bought a billboard, and people think that billboards are done, but what we've done with the billboard, we've got an intro video on our D&G show where it flashes pictures of the billboard. So when they're watching our show, I mean, on Main Street in Shelbyville, Illinois, if you're driving, you're going to see our billboard. So they're associating our videos with our billboard.
What's the billboard look? Just like your face on the billboard?
Yeah, it pretty much. It's kind of generic.
Like we should do that.
Yeah, I'd like to do a few different things. We renew like in February. I'd like to try to do a few different things to catch more attention. But yeah, it's basically our pictures, and it's a pretty generic billboard, but people recognize us. Kyle, you might you just had a baby, right?
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yes.
So my wife and I just had a little girl back in March, and I'm not kidding you.
There you go.
We were in the delivery room, and they had to draw blood, and the guy that came in to draw blood, he looks at me, he goes, "Hey, do you have a billboard in Shelbyville?" I was like, "You better believe it." So,
well, dude, that's the whole point, right? So
exactly. My wife, she makes fun of me so much because my chest puffs up when someone recognizes me from some type of marketing. So yeah, we're in the delivery room, and some guy calls out my billboard. So anyway, we're coupling that.
Yeah, that's me, bro.
Yeah, that's me. Here's my card.
Last time I was in the delivery room, I was told, yeah, you're okay. Go down to the cafeteria and get yourself a chicken Caesar wrap. We're not going to have a baby for a while. I was gone no more than 5 minutes, and I come back in. There's like 50 monitors attached to my wife. All kinds of things are beeping, and the doctor's saying, the cord's around her neck. The cord's around her neck. So listen, this is the difference between having number 1 and number 4. When number 4 came, I was on the business end eating a wrap, watching the whole thing go down.
Just slamming that chicken Caesar wrap.
I was completely
kind of like you're slamming that skunk ape trail mix that you got going on over there right now.
Yeah, that dehydrated fruit to keep me whole 30 compliant.
That shit looked like potpourri the other day. That was disgusting.
It's fantastic. It actually is fantastic. I do have a question though. When you guys are doing like the billboards and stuff, I assume you're using like carrier CoOp money and stuff like that for it.
So that's another hurdle we had to jump over. So we, our agency owners gave us kind of leeway to negotiate with the carriers for this CoOp money. And with the billboards, we could not get a carrier to allow us to have our faces on the billboard. It was always, well, it's got to be our logo or this or that. I was like, that's not going to help us. So we just jumped into it on our own and used our own money to buy the billboard.
I'm guessing you don't have auto owners. You don't have auto owners in your agency?
So one of our agency partner does. We do not have a direct contract in our agency. So yeah, that would eliminate them. But yeah, that was one of the issues we ran into, and carrier, we're also trying to get carriers to sponsor some of our social media stuff. And that's like pulling teeth. I contacted every carrier rep that we have. And if it wasn't radio or newspaper or, print, they weren't on board with sponsoring like our videos or, our own little show that we have. We finally found one small mutual company that's headquartered here in Illinois that was on board with it. And guess who we're trying to push a lot of business to as much as possible? Because man, if they took a leap of faith with us.
So that's interesting. Why were they not on board with any of the video stuff? I mean, that's where all of marketing is going. Like,
they can't control it.
Well, yeah, there's no way. They said they couldn't measure it was the issue.
Well, that's bull crap. That's bull crap. You can measure the video. I think it's more along the lines of they can't control it. They can't control what's going to come out of your mouth, what you're going to say. And the next thing you know, you make some left-handed remark and you've got a carrier's name attached to it, then you got a big problem. My point would be, why am I even appointed with you if you're so concerned about me being a moral or social hazard to you? Listen, carrier people, if you're listening to this and you didn't give my man some CoOp money, you need to ante up and talk to Shelbyville. There ain't that many people there. You could own the whole town if you give them enough money.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I needed.
Good grief.
Yeah,
and I know
listen,
man, I know they're listening because they email me all the time.
Show's over.
That's crazy. Video's where it's going to. And if you don't realize that it's going to video, guess what? Your competitor
Sure.
will. And you know what? Even saying that it's going to video, we had a carrier the day I asked them for CoOp Money. They said, well, it's all going to digital. I was like, dude, it's already here.
Yeah,
it's not going there. It's here. And, I feel like if you don't start now, if you haven't already started, you're going to be behind. And, I got pretty frustrated. There was one carrier that was like, well, I don't think we can do that, but we can send you some beer koozies. I'm like, okay, that'd be great. So, yeah, that's a struggle that we're running into.
So that's a perfect segue into the beer situation.
Bro. I was just going to say, my response has been, listen, bro, I brew my own. I don't need your koozie.
Exactly. So Kyle, I'll explain it to you. I'm a home brewer. One of my hobbies is brewing beer, and I actually won a homebrew competition at a brewery in a neighboring town last year.
Nice.
Now this is a story you guys are going to love.
Yeah.
So I'm brewing this beer, and I see this competition pop up on Facebook. I'm like, oh, and I'm telling my wife, it's like, we got to go to this. I got to do it. And I got kind of wet or cold feet, and I was like, I don't know if my beer isn't that good. I mean, I'm not like I'm selling it or anything, but she's like, we should go just to enter it. Well, I get there and I ask them how many beers are in the competition, and it's like 40 from around. I'm like, I was hoping it was like a small town, smaller than Shelbyville. And I was like, I'm hoping for 10 maybe beers, and they're like, oh, there's 40. I'm like, okay.
As long as you don't have all the frat boys hovering around your display of beer, you're good. You're safe.
Right.
But I feel like with 40 though, if your beer sucks, you're in a better position than if you're in there with 10 and your beer sucks. Because everybody's going to remember.
You know what I equate that to?
Ahead.
And you probably don't know this because you hate Disney World, but I equate that to when you're at Epcot and you go to the Coke place and they have the Cokes from around the world and there's like 6 of them there. Yeah. You're going to remember very quickly which one you're never going to drink again.
Yeah. The Coke from India sucks for sure. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. My wife is obsessed with Coke and Disney, so I'm with you there. But anyways, go ahead, continue, carry on.
So we're sitting there, my wife and I, and we're just eating dinner because I'm like, I have no chance of winning this competition. I'm not even really paying attention. This guy's announcing the winners.
Pounded.
What did they serve for dinner?
He's pounding fried Oreos and fried Twinkies. And
exactly.
Freaking pizza on a stick.
Ribs and curly fries or something. And they're getting third place, second place, and first place, Derek Hayden. I'm like looking around. I'm like, no way did I just win this competition.
And then they looked at it and said, hey, that's the guy with the billboard.
Exactly. So
what kind of beer did you brew?
It was an American Pale Ale. Yeah.
Okay.
I brew all different types, but that was an American Pale Ale.
Okay.
One of the awards for winning was I got to go to the brewery and like brew my beer, and they put it on draft. So this is the part that it's like a typical day in the life of Derek. I go there on a Saturday, brew my beer. The brewery burns down the following Thursday.
Oh my gosh!
I'm like, oh no! So
probably and by the way, probably insured by the carrier that would not give you CoOp money.
Oh my god!
Better believe it. So
That's
I'm like,
crazy.
I'm like expecting a call from the fire marshal, being like, "What was your ingredient in this beer?" I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, luckily this brewery they just finished rebuilding, and there's some great owners and. Their brewery is awesome. And actually we had him as a special guest on our show to talk about the process of, rebuilding after
going through that.
fire.
Yeah.
So use it as an opportunity, I guess. But that's my beer competition experience.
That's pretty cool. So is that that's your bread and butter? That's your go-to, or you said you brew all different kinds? Like, is that your favorite, or that's just what you were most confident would not suck at the beer show?
Yeah. It was an easy recipe. There wasn't too much that went into it, so I knew it wasn't going to be like a weird, flavored beer. And no, I do all different types. I've got one going right now. It's a porter, which if you're familiar with beer, it's a darker beer.
Yeah.
And my family farm, we have a family farm outside of town, We got a
Daddy
ton
likey.
of wild blackberries.
There you go. I mean, it's getting close to porter time up there. I mean, it's starting to cool off in the near future.
Yeah,
dude, you're doing a blackberry porter.
Correct. So we have a ton of blackberries, wild blackberries grown at our family farm. So I was like, let's go pick some blackberries, and we'll try to throw these blackberries into the porter and see how it turns out. So I've got it in the basement right now fermenting, and in about a week I'll throw some blackberries in and we'll see how she turns out.
Nice.
Dude, I'll admit I didn't watch the whole video. I watched the first little bit of it, and then one of my kids came in and distracted me because you released it over the weekend, right? You didn't do that in the work week. So, yeah, my chances of catching up on social media on the weekend are like non-existent. I meant to go back and watch it. I just haven't yet. But it's interesting to me because, like, you have some stuff you've rigged too, right? Like, part of your process I saw was like an old Gatorade cooler.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I try to depict on the video is if people want to try it, you don't have to spend like thousands of dollars buying beer equipment. You can buy it. I bought that cooler off of Facebook Marketplace for $10, and I use an old turkey fryer, for the rest of it. So it's like a $50 setup to make beer. And
you win competitions, and you've got a billboard.
What more could you want?
Yeah, it's an award-winning combination. That's right.
I want to be Derek.
Anyway, yeah, you can start brewing beer for pretty inexpensive. You don't have to go all out. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars on it if you want, but to do it in my garage, I'm not going to spend too much money, and I'm making like 3 gallons of beer at a time. So it's not like it's going to be a huge deal to produce a mass quantity of beer.
3 gallons. That's a lot of porter. If it was something lighter, that might not seem like it's that much, but porters and stouts, 3 gallons would last me a couple days.
Yep, a few days.
Well, yeah, if you're making it for yourself, but I would imagine he probably shares with friends.
Oh yeah,
3 gallons can go pretty quick.
That's right,
dude. If I'm you, I'm like doing that and handing it off at marketing drops when I'm cold calling on people.
Talk about branding yourself, baby. There we go.
Another thing that I've had been successful on marketing drops is deer sausage. I don't know if you guys ever have any deer sausage down there in Florida, but one of my other
our deer are the size. Yeah, our deer are the size of dogs.
Yeah, they are.
Like, they're not even.
Dude, so I've got a friend who goes hunting up in Illinois, and he's got all these trophies on his mantle, and there's like a couple of heads from deer that he shot in Florida versus when he goes up in November to Illinois, and they are like triple the size. It's insane.
Yeah, there's big deer in like Illinois, Iowa, and all of that. I went to school in West Virginia, and I'm actually working right now. I'm trying to wrap up a deal on 150 acres with a cabin on it, about 45 minutes outside of the Charleston airport, that I can use to fly clients up and let them go hunting and use it as a place to hang out in the summers with my boys. Well, all my kids, but, go hunting, fishing. It's got mineral rights. It's got, fishing ponds on there and all of that. I miss it, man, because I love fishing, and my all-time favorite is offshore, and we love going to the Keys to hit, offshore fishing, but you're just not going to get any kind of hunting down here like you can up that way. And I mean, you start getting into the Midwest, it's ridiculous.
Oh yeah. If I could make commission just sitting in a deer stand all day, that would be my dream job. But they don't pay me too much to.
Do you have like mule deer and stuff like that in Illinois?
No, we're strictly whitetail at this point in time. I hear the mule deers are expanding, but it's more out west is where the mule deer are at. I wasn't sure how far west.
I wasn't sure how far west they started.
Yeah, I want to say Kansas area, maybe even into western Missouri. But here in Illinois, you've got your whitetails as your main big game hunting anyway.
Cool deal. Well, listen, man, we've been going about an hour.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. I know people are going to reach out to you, especially carriers that just want to shower you with freaking CoOp money. They're going to make it rain for Derek at this point. How do they find you, brother?
Absolutely. Hey, guys, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, how do they find you, man? Tell them how to get hold of you.
LinkedIn's probably the best. You can also email me, Derek H. That's DEREKH at ShelbyvilleINS.com.
Cool deal. Well, listen, man, thanks again for spending an hour with us on a Friday afternoon. We wish you all the best, and we'll definitely have you back to catch up with you at some point.
Thanks,
awesome.
Derek.
Had a great time, guys. Yep.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.